This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will fall and severely injure his head on October 31st, 2025. It will lead to his death. His death may or may not be on October 31st, but he will fall and injure his head as predicted on October 31st. The post date of this video on the social media platform you are watching this on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will fall and seriously, severely injure his head on October 31st, 2025. This video will be really profound. Some profound prophetic signs will be explained in this video that ultimately point to this prediction. When Paul Simon dies, or rather, he will die as a result of his head injury. It's not certain whether he will die immediately on October 31st or later. I suspect it will be later. And that he will severely, I should say, injure his head on October 31st and then die at a later date. That's the assumption. But he could die, it's possible that he could die on October 31st on the same day it is predicted that he will slip and fall. Of course, he has a big hit, slip, slide, and away. Now, this title to this video could have easily, or should have, I should say, included a reference to the freed hostages, because I will talk about this sign involving Connor McDavid, the best player in the NHL currently. But this sign involving Connor McDavid occurred on the same day that the hostages were freed, as I'll explain. And I'll explain how it's connected and how the two are relevant. You could probably already guess with the name McDavid, but let's get into what I just wrote here. Oh, by the way, this email, as it says here, was composed 33 minutes ago. I intend to post this video today, October 14th, and the post date of the video on the social media platform that you are watching this on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email. Okay, so October 14th. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. Now, on the day that the hostages were released, the best NHL player re-signed with the Oilers. He won the MVP 3 times in a row. His number is jersey number 97, which is the 25th prime number, and he signed for $25 million. And the number was an interesting, for the sports world, part of the story, because he signed for a moderate $25 million, and the Edmonton Oilers are back-to-back 2 years in a row champions of the Western Conference. And so they've been to the Stanley Cup 2 years in a row. They lost both times, but they have a good team. And so they are attempting, I guess, to retain the good players. And that's why McDavid would, I guess, according to the story, be willing to sign for an amount that's not so high, given the fact that he's the best player in the NHL and has won the MVP 3 years in a row. So in other words, the dollar amount of his contract was noteworthy. It wasn't simply an arbitrary number. Well, it's not arbitrary because it's prophetic, but I mean, the story isn't just that he signed, but the amount also is noteworthy in the news story. And again, the amount is $25 million, which is prophetically relevant, as I'll explain. But for one thing, his jersey number is the 25th prime number. Now, the number 25, and this is why it's prophetic, in Bible prophecy, is symbolic of the Temple Mount, and specifically the rebuilding of the Temple Mount and the temple, as described in the book of Ezekiel, the coming future temple. in which the King of Kings, Lord Jesus Christ, will dwell in the Messianic age. David in the Bible, I'm referring to, prepared the construction of the temple. So in the Bible, David is associated with the temple. The player's name is Connor McDavid. David became king of Israel at the age of 30. The Oilers goalie stopped 30 shots when they blanked the New York Rangers for the third time at home this season. The Rangers have been shut out in all 3 of their first home games. And this is a record. This is the first time in NHL history that a team has been shut out in all 3 of their first home games of the season. And God uses records for signs. But as we can see here, we have a pattern of the number 3, because we have the 3-time MVP re-signing, and then him and his team shutting out for the 3rd time in a row the Rangers, who had 30 shots on net on the Oilers. And again, David is associated with 30 in the Bible. So 25 is symbolic of the Temple Mount. Number 25th prime number, re-signed for $25 million on the day that the hostages were released, which people claim to be the end of the war. Hamas began the war with what Hamas called the Al-Aqsa flood, which is a reference to the Temple Mount. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is on the Temple Mount. The Hamas claims that the invasion, the Al-Aqsa flood, the massacre, the genocide, the true genocide, was a response to something the Jews did regarding the Temple Mount, and on it goes, right? Because it is all about the Temple Mount. And that's what's referenced in the name that they gave their genocide, the Al-Aqsa flood, which is again the reference to the Temple Mount. McDavid, number 25th prime number, re-signed for $25 million on the same day that the hostages were freed or released after being taken captive in Al-Aqsa flood. And this day was the 7th and final day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or known as the Feast of Booths. God dwelled in the tabernacle prior to the construction of the temple. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the timing of this, the timing of the freed hostages on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, in a war that began with a reference to the Temple Mount, is not a coincidence, designed by God, and that's because he's pointing to the temple, the tabernacle. The tabernacle was the tent that God dwelled in before the temple was made. In other words, it's the same thing. It's the structure that God dwelled in ancient Israel, which, and the temple again was built or prepared to be built by David, King David. So God dwelled in the tabernacle prior to the construction of the temple. And we have here the freed hostages on the date that points to this, and a player named David, and a prophetic re-signing for an amount that's the same amount as his jersey number, which is symbolic of the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. And it'll be the 3rd temple, or am I jumping ahead? I think I'm jumping ahead. But that's why he won 3 MVP awards, and they shut out the Rangers with 30 shots on net for the Rangers' record-setting 3rd shutout at home, as in the dwelling of the Lord at home, his home, the temple. Okay. I jumped ahead, I'm sure. The Feast of Tabernacles is followed by Shemini Atzeret, otherwise known as the 8th day of Tabernacles. Symbolic of a new beginning and a reference to the new messianic age, the new age, the messianic age in which the Lord dwells in the temple. McDavid, number 25th prime number, who re-signed for $25 million, and his team shut out the Rangers at the time of the re-signing, the day after. The day after was the 8th day. So he re-signed. This is all. It's all precise, right? McDavid re-signed on the 7th and last day of Tabernacles, but there's also in the Bible this one day after, the next day, the 8th day, which is commonly referred to as the 8th day of Tabernacles. It's not. It kind of is part of Tabernacles, and it kind of is separate. It's like a new beginning. But anyway. The 8th day was the day that McDavid and his team shut out the Rangers, but it was the day after he re-signed. Okay, now, when they shut out the Rangers, it was an NHL record, and God uses records for signs. When the Rangers were shut out for the 3rd time in a row for all 3 of their first home games of the season. No other team in history has started the season with all 3 of their home games getting shut out. This hints at the construction of the 3rd temple, tabernacle, on the Temple Mount. The 3rd temple being the new beginning in which the Lord will dwell in. The Oilers in the new age. So the Oilers goalie stopped 30 shots on net by the Rangers. David became the king of Israel at the age of 30. The Rangers were shut out 2-0. This was the day after 20 hostages were released. And that's not an accident. This is amazing. This is all precise. In other words, the reason why it was 20 hostages is because of exactly what I'm explaining in this video. And as far as I know, this is the only place in which this is being explained. That's how important this video is. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, make sure that you post the link to this video everywhere in social media and don't ever stop sharing it when the prediction for Paul Simon's fall on October 31st comes to pass. Okay, so the shutout of 2-0 and the 20 hostages hints at the second coming of the King of Kings, who will dwell in the rebuilt temple. The Oilers entered the season as the 2-time back-to-back champions of the Western Conference. This too hints at the second coming. A ranger is typically someone in a law enforcement or military, paramilitary role specializing in patrolling a given territory, called ranging or scouting. The name Rangers, the New York Rangers hockey team, hints at Zechariah chapter 1 and the horsemen who were sent by God to patrol the earth. I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding, this is from Zechariah chapter 1. I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. Then I said, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel who talked with me said to me, "I will show you what they are." So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered, "These are they whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth, the rangers." And they answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees and said, "We have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest." Zechariah is told by an angel, quote, "Therefore, thus says the Lord, I have returned to Jerusalem with mercy. My house shall be built in it, declares the Lord of hosts, and the measuring line shall be stretched out over Jerusalem. Cry out again, thus says the Lord of hosts. My cities shall again overflow with prosperity, and the Lord will again comfort Zion and again choose Jerusalem. This is a prophecy. This was written a long time before the second exile of the Jews from Israel in the 1st century. But the Lord here is speaking to the prophet Zechariah about this regathering again of the Jews, because the Jews were exiled to Babylon and then they were regathered. Zechariah the prophet comes after this. He is, if you will, an end times prophet throughout the entire book. Here, Zechariah the prophet is speaking of the end of the age. And this, as he says, again, the Lord will again come choose Jerusalem. My cities shall again overflow with prosperity. Zechariah did not write this during or before the Babylonian exile. He's speaking about this final restoration, the second restoration, when the Jews are restored, not from Babylon, but from the four corners of the earth, as it says in another prophecy. Which is why when the Jews returned to Israel in the 19th and 20th centuries and the 21st century, mostly in the 20th century, it was from almost 100 countries. But here, God is also talking about Jerusalem, specifically in this prophecy here. And specifically, he mentions God, my house shall be built in it. He's talking about the temple that will be rebuilt. And that's why the name Rangers. That's why prophetically God has used the New York Rangers here. Because this is the following verses that follows this passage here about these rangers that patrolled the earth. I just cut out a couple of passages in between. This is Zechariah 1:8 through 11, and this is Zechariah 1:16 through 17. This also isn't the first time God pointed to Zechariah 1:17. He did this in 2023, 10 days after the start of the war, on the date 10/17, which hinted at Zechariah 1:17. That date was known even before the start of the war, that it would be a major prophetic date in God's science. And that was the day, if you recall, that the errant Hamas missile hit one of its own hospitals, killing 200 to 300 people, causing an outcry around the world, etc. As in the cry out. But by the way, I just realized that just now. Years later. You always pick up something new whenever you go over the material, because it's just so infinite and deep, and so many hidden things. Well, anyway, yeah. There's lots to that. I explained it all in a video I posted a long time ago. You should watch all of the videos on this channel when the prediction for Paul Simon's fall on October 31st comes to pass. The wise person will know that. Every minute of every video. As daunting as that will be, because there's a lot of videos. And if you're on a channel without all of the videos, contact me or find out where the channel is with all of the videos. Perhaps I'll leave that information on the website. Now, the record-setting shutouts in the third Rangers home games at the end of Tabernacles hints at the home of the Lord and the building of the third temple. Again, it was the third game that had 30 shots on net. That was the record-setting shutout at home. The temple will be rebuilt. You know what? The fact that the Rangers scored 0 could be also a reference to how when the rangers in the prophecy went out, there was nothing to report. The earth remains at rest. That's interesting. So where was I? The temple will be rebuilt. This hinted at the 3-time MVP winner, McDavid, re-signing for $25 million. Okay? Before I copy-pasted this into this email, I put in bold and italics the word rebuilt and re-signing. So this is all pointing to the rebuilding of the temple, which is why McDavid re-signed for $25 million. 25 is symbolic of the temple and the Temple Mount, and David in the Bible prepared the building of the temple. And he's the 3rd-time MVP, which ties it all together too. But he didn't just sign, he re-signed, because it's hinting at the rebuilding of the temple. It's amazing. The Rangers were shut out for a total of 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes, right? Because each NHL game is 60 minutes, 3 games in a row. They were shut out for a total of 3 games at 60 minutes each, which since that's 666, the number that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, who will be on the Temple Mount as prophesied. This hints at the coming Antichrist on the Temple Mount, as I wrote. In the Bible, the Antichrist is symbolized by the king of Egypt, who dwelled in a palace. The king of rock and roll's mansion is in Little Egypt, in Memphis, Tennessee, and Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt. The king of rock's Graceland mansion is symbolism for the rebuilt temple in which the King of Kings will dwell in. Paul Simon is Jewish, and his best-selling solo album is Graceland. Graceland is Simon's 7th solo album. McDavid re-signed on the 7th day of Tabernacles, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before Simon is predicted to fall and severely injure his head. You see, that's why the 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes. The king of rock fell and severely injured his head in 1967, the same year that the Jews recaptured the Temple Mount in 67 on the date 6/7. So you see, the Graceland estate is symbolism for the Temple Mount, which is why the king of rock fell on his head, and many professionals now believe that Elvis died as a result not of drugs, but the drugs he was taking were a result of the autoimmune diseases that he suffered from because of the head injury. So in other words, he died from his head injury years later, which is why I think Paul Simon won't die right away from his head injury. Okay, this is amazing because Paul Simon is associated with the king's Graceland mansion, and which is symbolism for the Temple Mount. The hostages got released in Israel and went back to Jerusalem. Some of them, I'm sure. Just guessing, but I assume that some of them lived in Jerusalem. Well, no, I'm sorry, I take that back, because they did come from the southern part. I just gapped right there. So anyway, but the point is that this all happened on the day that McDavid resigned. And again, the war started because of the Temple Mount. That's why the name Al-Aqsa Flood, given by Hamas. And Hamas is Antichrist. In fact, the perpetrators of the genocide on that day were demonically possessed. Okay, so what we have here is the day after McDavid resigned, his team, the day after McDavid resigned and the hostages were freed, his team shut out the Rangers for the Rangers' record-setting 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes at home, which confirms that Simon will fall and injure his head at home, by the way, 6 plus 6 plus 6 days after McDavid resigned, which hinted at the home of the Lord being rebuilt. It's all so amazing, right? This was, so all of this was 2 years after the war began. All of this hints at the second coming of the King of Kings to free the captives, as it's described in the book of Isaiah prophecy, which Jesus read in the synagogue as described in the book of Luke. And dwell in the Temple Mount. Okay, so the fact that the 20 hostages and the 2-0 shutout occurred on the 2-year anniversary of the beginning of the war, what I'm adding, this new information here, is that the 2 years period is also symbolic of this second coming of the King of Kings to free the captives, as in the 20 hostages, and dwell in the Temple Mount in the New Age, which is symbolized by Shemini Atzeret, this new beginning day, the 8th day of Tabernacles, the day of the shutout of the Rangers, which again pointed to the Rangers in the prophecy and God telling Zechariah and the world and the Jews that he is going to come and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Yeah, the Rangers were shut out 2-0 in conjunction with the 20 freed hostages. So 2 years after the war began. It is interesting that in all 4 of the first baseball games in this year's ALCS and NLCS, American League and National League Championship Series, in other words, the semifinals in Major League Baseball, the home team lost. So we have this pattern, and these games coincided with the dates and signs explained in the prior emails here. In other words, coincided with the record-setting 3 shutout losses in a row for the first 3 games of the season for the New York Rangers. And so we have this also established here in these first games. Each of these series, their first 2 games, the home team lost both games. A total of 4, the first 4 games of the semifinals, the home team lost. So this is an interesting addition to this. And the fact that these games coincided with the dates we are talking about, which was the date of the release of the hostages and the re-signing of McDavid, and then McDavid and his team shutting out the New York Rangers the following day. These were the dates that coincided with these home team losses in the Major League Baseball playoffs. The name of the goalie who received a prophetic 30 shots on net from the Rangers is Skinner. Okay, so this Skinner goalie is the goalie for the Oilers and McDavid's team. But the Rangers shot 30 shots on net, and Skinner stopped them all, which led to the Rangers being shut out. Okay, so Skinner shut out the Rangers, who, with this shutout, have been shut out for their 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes at home. Right? Each NHL game is 60 minutes. Their first 3 games, that gives us a 666. And it was Skinner that shut them out in the 3rd game. Now, the name Skinner hints at sinner, or the man of sin, is one of the Antichrist's titles in Bible prophecy. And Skinner hints at, and man of sin hints at Antichrist, man of sin, on the Temple Mount, whose number in Bible prophecy is 666. Which the shutout by Skinner and 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes hints at. And again, as I explained earlier, this is all about the rebuilding of the Temple Mount, hence the re-signing of McDavid, as I explained earlier. So this is also pointing to the man of sin, the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. That's why Skinner. Sinner. Okay. The first of the 30 shots on net and Skinner by the Rangers was shot by Rangers player number 4. Demons will emerge from the bottomless pit through the unlocked door, and God uses the number 4 to symbolize this because the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for a door. Ancient Hebrew letters are also symbols for things. The Antichrist, Pope Francis, will be resurrected by demons on April 26th, 2029, exactly 1,290 days, which is a period of time at the end of the last chapter of the very prophetic book of Daniel, chapter 12, and is a reference to an abomination on the Temple Mount. So this again applies to the Temple Mount, and it applies to an abomination set up by the Antichrist. Okay, so 1,290 days exactly after this game is when it is predicted that the Antichrist will be resurrected on April 26th, 2029. And again, this game pointed to the rebuilt temple on the Temple Mount. The Antichrist in Bible prophecy will be on the Temple Mount, doing the abomination. That's why this is very relevant, this connection. Antichrist Pope Francis will be on the Temple Mount. McDavid's re-signing, him being player number 25th prime number for $25 million, could also hint at the resurrection of Pope Francis. The 2 goals scored by the Oilers in this shutout of the Rangers were by players number 10 and player number 19, which hints at Revelation 9:11. God uses a pairing of 9 and 2 ones to hint at Revelation 9:11 in general in his signs. This is the passage that symbolizes when demons will emerge from the bottomless pit and possess people. This is why Skinner, as in sinner and man of sin, and his jersey number is 74. 74 hints at the date 7-4 and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And speaking of signing, it was McDavid who re-signed. Now, the reason why God does this, it's amazing. It took a while to figure this out, but the date 7-4, and thus the use of the number 74 here, to point to the Declaration of Independence, is that in the Declaration, or it is known, the Declaration is known for the phrase inalienable rights. Now, first of all, the Declaration of Independence hints at the original sin in the Bible, which is independence from God. Inalienable rights hints at the aliens that are coming as judgment on America for turning away from God. And where do the inalienable rights come from? God. And so what happens when America no longer believes in God? They get deceived by demons pretending to be aliens. And if you doubt this, I'll have an example of proof for you here. God is using this to hint at demons pretending to be aliens. This is why, for example, the Roswell UFO conspiracy theory, which basically is the symbolism or the symbol for UFOs and aliens, began on the date 7-4 in 47 in the 47th state. And 9/11 in 2001, the events of 9/11 also pointed to Revelation 9/11. And that's why building number 7 collapsed with 47 floors. It was a reference to Roswell and aliens who will pass through the door from the bottomless pit, which is why the door is symbolized by number 4, as I just mentioned. And that's why the 4th plane crashed and killed 44 people. And in a 40-acre pit, because the plane crashed at a 40-degree angle, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh. Of the 2 goals that McDavid and his team scored, only one of them was not on an empty net. So arguably, the real true goal was the 1 goal, and the 1 goal not on an empty net was scored by the player named Frederick. Paul Simon's middle name is Frederick. Simon is from New York City. This NHL player, Frederick, plays for New York City, and the game was prophetic because the home team lost in New York City. This confirms the prediction that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head 6 plus 6 plus 6 days from McDavid's re-signing, which was the day before New York was shut out for 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes when they were scored upon by the player named Frederick. 20 hostages were released. The Rangers were shut out 2-0. The number of shots the Rangers had was prophetic. As we know, 30 shots. We've already explained that. 30, King David, 30 years, etc. McDavid, three-time MVP, etc. The number of shots McDavid and the Oilers had on the net in this same game was 22. The number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. The inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, described in the book of Ezekiel in the Bible, would have been a Tav mark. The Tav letter is the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes. Chromosomes have 2 arms, and they come in pairs, 2 and 2, hence 22. Now, the mark of the Antichrist is the SHOT. It was 22 shots on net, and this symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist shots. The number 666 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, SHOT. The Oilers, who had 22 shots on net in the game, shut out the Rangers at home for their 60 plus 60 plus 60th minutes of being shut out. And again, 666 symbolizes the mark, and they had 22 shots on net. Although the Rangers had 4 plus 4 more shots on net than the Oilers, McDavid and the Oilers shut out the Rangers for a loss. This extra 4 plus 4 shots on net that the Rangers had and yet still lost and were still shut out hints at the 44th president Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, SHOT. 20 hostages were released when the Rangers were shut out 2-0, and the Oilers had 22 shots on net. The Rangers had 30 shots on net. The 3-time MVP re-signed. This hints at Genesis 3:22. The Rangers' 30 shots on net when the Oilers had 22 shots on net hints at Genesis 3:22. This game is, and by the way, the reason for that is again because Genesis 3:22 is symbolic of the first lie ever told at the beginning of the age, which will be the same lie that will be told at the end of the age, which will be a promise of immortality without God. And it'll come through the SHOTs, which is why the 30 shots and 22 shots on net. Okay, and this game with the 30 shots and 22 shots on net is 3 times 22 days before the third interstellar object will be closest to Earth on December 19th. The prophetic 30 shots on net and the 3-time MVP's re-signing hints at the third interstellar object, this comet, 3I Atlas, which is itself symbolism for the coming shot on Earth by an asteroid. That's what God is using the third interstellar object to symbolize, the coming shot on Earth, the hit of the asteroid on Earth. The 30 shots on net without a goal resulted in the third loss in a row at home with being shut out. This too is symbolism for judgment by an asteroid hit, and this is symbolized by the third interstellar object, right? Because it's a loss as well. So it's like judgment. The third loss in a row is connected to this third interstellar object, which will be judgment on Earth from God. The 30 shots on net without a goal that resulted in the Rangers' third shutout in a row made it 60 plus 60 plus 60 minutes of being shut out to begin the season, which has never happened before, and God uses firsts and records for signs. The 30 shots and 22 shots on net hints at 3 times 22 days to the closest approach to Earth of the third interstellar object. It is also 66 days from the 60 plus 60 plus 60th minute of shutout for the Rangers to the closest approach to Earth of the comet. Okay, so it's 3 times 22 days, which is also 66 days, which is also relevant because, again, it's not just the 30 shots and 22 shots, but it's also the 60 plus 60 plus 60th minute of shutout. Trump is symbolism for Joshua because the Israelites led by Joshua blew trumpets and they enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 when they did so. They marched around the walls of security of Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. And then the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. That's why Trump's presidency and election campaign, the first ones were synonymous with his border wall of security, and after he left office, the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. From the triple sabotage of Trump at the UN, which Trump called it the triple sabotage, which was when the escalator, the teleprompter, and the sound didn't work when he gave a speech at the UN. So that speech is 3 sets of 7 days to the 30 shots on net. The triple sabotage connects to the 30 shots on net. The third interstellar object closest approach to Earth is 3 times 22 days from the 30 and 22 shots on net. The triple sabotage pointed to the third interstellar object. Okay, so the triple sabotage here, as we can see now, connects to the third interstellar object's closest approach to Earth. Because again, the triple sabotage is 3 times 7 days to the 30 shots on net, and the third interstellar object closest approach to Earth is 3 times 22 days from the 30 shots on net, but also the 30 and 22 shots on net. That's why 3 times 22 days. 20 hostages were released when the Rangers were shut out 2-0. I just read this paragraph. Yeah. The final goal and shot on net was made by player number 19, right? For McDavid and his team. The final goal and shot on net was made by player number 19. The game pointed to the coming asteroid shot, which is predicted to be on December 26th, 2030, which will be exactly 1,900 days after player number 19's shot on the empty net, which made the score 2-0, which hints at the second coming, which will be shortly after the shot of the asteroid on Earth. 1,900 days after player number 19's shot that made it 2-0. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.